Welcome. This is another episode of the Prosperity Mindset. And as you know, our focus is to improve your life, improve the quality of your relationship, the quality of your health, and the quality of your finances through the renewing of your subconscious mind. And today I have an amazing guest on the show who has been in the field of coaching, who has been impacting lives, and he's no stranger to self-development and the subconscious change work himself. Please welcome Tim OKeefe. Tim, welcome to the show.
Robert, thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here on your esteemed show. This is pretty cool. I've been excited about this for a long time.
Yeah, it's really good to have you. And Tim, you and I have spoken before. You have a really amazing journey. And would you tell us what you've been focusing on and how you got into this type of coaching?
Well, I'm a football coach at heart. It's in my bones, but was it that way 20 years ago? I don't know. I was pulled to it. My oldest son, who's heading towards, he's about 28, I think, and he was like in the 5th or 6th grade. A buddy of mine who I played ball with in college, his wife was at a flag game that we were playing. My son's game was against this kid's team in El Segundo, and I was just appalled because it wasn't real football. It was flag football, and just a whole lot of bad habits and stuff. And I was kind of a purist and less flexible than I am now. And so I talked to his wife, and I said, hey, I know your kid's also playing tackle. How do we get my son into that? And, I'm going on 20 years later, here I am.
That's wonderful. And I remember that there were certain imprints, if you will, that influenced your life. Can you mention a few of those, please?
Yeah, really huge. And I realized and just remembered within the last month or two, this one, and we used to go camping, and I'm probably in the 2nd grade, and I'm just a little doofus running around barefoot, probably no shirt and a buzz haircut up in the mountains. And my mom and dad and all their friends are drinking around this big old campfire, almost bonfire, at least in my memory. And I go running full speed towards the group, which is towards the fire, and I trip over something, and I'm going head first, it seems like, into the fire. But I had the presence of mind, I guess, or presence of body to flip to the side and avoid getting charred or burned to death. Everybody is like, gasping for air. And then it seems like all the ladies, or maybe that's all I cared about, but they all were like, oh my God, little Timmy, everybody called me Timmy. Timmy, what, that was amazing. And in my mind, they said, oh, that was so athletic. I don't know if that's the word they said, but, rewritten a billion years later, that's how I remember it. So funny thing, I grow up and I grew up to be this guy, this athlete, and there's a lot of other along the way, but that was probably specific to athleticism. And then along the way, not too long later, I was in the 4th grade, and I'm watching. We used to go to my grandma's up in the mountains. Mom and dad and grandma and friends are all in the kitchen, and I would watch Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, Howard Cosell, right? And I would watch that every weekend or, whenever he fought, and it was always exciting because he always won. And as a kid, I realized even as a kid, you like the winners, right? And then UCLA basketball, and they were on like, 100-game winning streak or something. They just never lost. And for the first time, I had actually paid attention where they interviewed John Wooden at the end, which was maybe the first time I actually ever heard the man speak. And he talked about the importance of goals and goal setting. So I stood up, and after it was all over, walked into the kitchen and boldly announced that I was going to be a college football player as of the fourth grade. I was going to be a college football player, and I was going to play football at UCLA. And there began the journey.
That's really awesome, Tim. And I remember you had mentioned that once you set these goals, it came with certain decisions because you had to burn some boats. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So so I had forgotten about the whole thing, and I remember getting into, seventh grade, I guess, or sixth grade, and my buddy, who I'm still friends with to this day, Doug, had played for the local youth football, tackle football, and his dad coached and whatnot, and I had no, it wasn't even on my radar, right? And then he had these sign up flyers to pass out for the league, and so I looked and I went home and I asked if I could play, and they agreed, and I played for 3 years of junior youth football, and then went to high school, and ended up, long story short, going to high school, winning just about everything a kid could win, rightfully or not rightfully, but I was blessed with tons and tons of awards, which was almost mean because when it came time to recruit me, it was crickets. It was like cruel. I'd get all these external things from the world, like, the newspapers and awards and MVP and this and that, and crickets. Nobody cared. And certainly UCLA didn't care. So now you talk about goals and flexibility, right? So I had to go to UCLA, right? That was part of the goal, but they didn't care. And nor did they have a business program, which is what I wanted to study in school. So I was like kind of fried. I'm like, how do I keep my goal? I did the football part. I've paid the price. I set it all up, but I never considered that maybe they just wouldn't care. And so I ended up going to junior college at El Camino here in Torrance. And I go in, and the thing that gave me my success that I don't think enough people talk about, and most great football players I talk to, and I will ask when I meet somebody who's done a lot, normally I'll go all into modeling world and I'll start asking them these model questions. And, like this guy I talked to about 6 months ago, I asked him at the end of our talk, it was a business talk, and at the end of it, he played for the Raiders. He was in the Hall of Fame. And I said, hey man, can I ask you why you? I go, as well as I do, there's other guys that you know of that had as much or more talent than you, but why did you make it and they didn't? And he had the answer right away. His answer was A, football IQ, which to him meant he's able to see the game at the speed and actually slow it down, so he can articulate it and comprehend it as it's happening. So reaction time. And then most importantly, what I call burn the boats is he goes, I have no choice. It's either go to the league and play and get out of this place where I'm at, or I'm going to end up dying here. And and so I didn't live and grow up in such a desperate situation as this gentleman, but I had made my goals, and I had my imprints from a very early age, and it influenced me. And so that there was no choice. I was going to get a scholarship. And by the time I was a sophomore, I had said, okay, it's okay to still get a scholarship and play college football. That's the big goal. It doesn't have to be at UCLA. And so I ended up going to the University of the Pacific, which in some ways influenced me greatly at Pacific, because there was, inside of the psychology, or I don't know what you would call it, of the school, And the sports was the new age of sports psychology. And I didn't know that is what was going on, but Pete Carroll, the great coach from SC and then at Seattle Seahawks, he's very much Mr. Psychology, has a team psychologist who's from Hermosa Beach right down the street. And Pete came up with this guy who was at Pacific, because Pete also, he not only coached at Pacific, but he played there. And there was just amazing stuff going on, all at about the same time of the inner, what was that book called, The Inner Game of Tennis? When all that was exploding into sports, they were part of it. And they even hit Glenn Albaugh, who was the golf coach, was really one of the big instigators of it. And he actually hypnotized our whole football team one time and did guys individual and stuff. And that got me interested in more so than ever, the mental aspects of the game.
That's really amazing. And I am following a lot of the different hypnosis modalities, and I love real life implications. Can you tell us how that particular session, or when you said this a man hypnotized this group, changed your life? What was a measurable outcome? How did it show up in your life?
He was really big on players being relaxed. I remember him teaching us, saying, you guys need to know how to go and get relaxed on demand. Everybody thinks you have to be all tense and all that as an athlete, especially as a football player who's, about to get smacked or about to smack somebody else. He goes, no, you have to be, you function best when you're relaxed, not when you're tense. And that really resonated with me, because when this session happened, it was after my first game up there, which would be my junior year. I played the first game just tense as a rock. And it wiped me out. I remember being exhausted. I remember it didn't feel right. And when he brought that out, I was like, wow, this makes sense, because I just played a game like that and I sucked. So this has to be the right answer.
Now, that's really awesome. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to explore this a little more, because this is such a counterintuitive thing. And I noticed that all the high performers and all the very successful people have achieved a state of relaxation. And when I say relaxation, it doesn't mean that you lean back in an armchair, but almost like a state of inner comfort.
Yeah.
So how would you be able to coach someone to relax into this state of inner peace where they can bring their gifts to the world? Is this something that you were able to observe in your years of coaching?
Well, yeah, with coaching, so one of the things I think is people don't know how to breathe, right? And so we often, as kids, the kids come out, especially kids that aren't in shape, this is the first real athletic thing they've ever done, or maybe taken serious or whatever. So they're coming from perhaps an out of shape situation. And when you're exhausted, you're going to be tense. You're not going to be able to perform, whether it be in the business world or on a football field or athletic field. You have to be in shape. And part of that is being able to breathe correctly. In fact, usually when kids get hurt, they're not really, 9 times out of 10, they're not injured. They're just hurt. They have a boo-boo. It hurts like hell, but they're not going to the hospital. It's just they're going to have a bad bruise at worst, but it's scary. If you've never been in that situation, it's a little scary. And so one of the things I'll always tell the kid, I'll go, look at me, look in my eyes right now, and I want you to do this. I want you to take a big breath and let it out, and do that 3 or 4 times for me, and just calm down. And I get them, and I'll use a cadence, and I'll slow it, each one a little slower, and just kind of put them into a mild relaxation where they can at least not be all freaked out. Because usually it's panic. It's not injury.
Okay. It's really cool. I also admire the statement that you had made, which was to, and I quote you, and you can certainly paraphrase it, is to heal your shit first or risk giving back that shit. Can you explain what you mean by that?
I have such articulate choices of words. There's two classes of coaches in my view, right? There's the professional coach, and when I say professional, I mean the college guys, the professional guys, and they have a whole different program. Okay, most of the guys in high school, not all, but most of the guys in youth and high school are volunteers. And so they get into football to give back, but quite often it's also to heal whatever shit they have left over from football. Because part of the attraction of coaching for me was I believe that there's very few places that offer a big opportunity to create profound growth and transformation as a football field. But at the same time, there's probably nothing else either that can destroy a soul as a football field and corrupt. And so a lot of guys come out of football, it's unfinished. Okay, so I'll give you a real life example right now, and I need to look. I tried last week. I got to try again today. I've got a kid that played for me, and in youth, had a great high school career, bounced around, and now he's at a Division I school. And then COVID comes. This was going to be his senior year, and COVID comes. He goes out to camp. He's there. It's a 3-week camp. They were doing it just in case there was a season. And he goes to the summer camp, and his girlfriend's there. He immediately gets COVID in isolation for, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks. Comes out to get to the last week of practice and fractures his fibula, and career over. Done. Worked his entire life for this. Forget high school, forget college. As a kid, referees would come to me in pregame go and ask where's so-and-so, because they were so excited to be able to see him play. He was just a kid that had another motor, and he's that guy. He's that guy that burned the boats, that obviously had the imprints early on and the goals, had it all, and worked his ass off as much as anybody I've ever seen, and probably more. And boom, it's taken away. It's taken away. And I tell kids all the time, play today in practice or in the game as if it's your last game, your last day of playing, because you don't get to decide when football is over. Football decides. And this is a great example. And so that's shit. I overheard that, the kid's, he's upset, and he's got to process it. He's got to process it that's beneficial for him going forward, right? And he's got great parents and all that, and luckily he had some good coaching along the way, not also at the other levels. So hopefully he's able to process it, and why I want to call him just to help out. But the shit is that shit, because it the ending is usually what I just described. It's usually not fun. And you usually don't want to stop playing. You've given your whole life to it, the better part of your life and your young adulthood, and you've given up on other things. While, other guys are partying and doing the frat thing in college and all that stuff. You're not doing that. You might go out here and there, but you got a different life. So That's what I mean by shit. And everybody, I think, I hate saying everybody and blanketing it. It's a bad choice, but it never surprises me when I find that there's residual pain 20, 30 years later in a football coach. And a while back, when I counsel other coaches, I'll often tell them, man, get your shit healed. Get it healed. Because if you're not doing that, then you're whatever corruptness that you never resolved that went on, whether if it's corrupt of your own thinking or corrupt just that you came up with some shitty coaches, then you're just going to pass that on to the next generation. And instead of getting better, we're going to get worse. And so that's what I mean by that.
I appreciate you explaining that. It makes perfect sense. And of course, I see this everywhere since I do very high level, subconscious coaching as well. So I totally understand why it is important to heal our, shit or stuff, all this inner stuff. Mm-hmm. And another thing that caught my attention when you and I were conversing a couple of weeks back is that you mentioned value propositions. And one of the questions that you had asked was, how can we determine if we are worthy of the value proposition that we are offering? And this really resonated with me because I think this particular one or question goes through every single person's mind, whether they are a coach or an individual, a parent or whatnot. So can you help the listeners understand, are we worthy of the value proposition we are offering? How can we answer that question?
I frame that in the sense that I have, as an adult, a mandate. And I've been given, depending on where I've been given tutelage over kindergartners all the way up through seniors in high school. And each has their own quirks, their own things about them. When I first started with the little guys, I was tying their shoes. If you can imagine that. It's that level of absurdity. And I know you talk often about, today's masculinity. And that's partly why I got into this, is there's been a lot of gifts that have been bestowed upon me through football and other things, but we're talking about coaching. And it taught me in many ways how to be a man and how not to be a man, and not get butthurt if things don't go my way, like UCLA, right? And I'm not able to play after my senior year of college. Boo-hoo, poor me. Never mind that I've been coddled as an athlete and got a free education and all that, but you don't, sometimes we don't look at our blessings. And so what is the value proposition? So I believe if we can get rid of all that crap and heal ourselves and then get better beyond just X's and O's, and I'm way out in Looneyville with some of the stuff that I do. So I have guys, that are my good guys that are, X's and O's and very analytical and all that stuff. And I make sure they keep me grounded so that I could be out there in airy fairyland doing my thing, right? And getting into these kids' heads. And that's the value proposition that I bring. I see things in weird ways. Oftentimes, and I say this, and even as I say it, I'm like going, oh God, Tim, I shouldn't repeat this. But I remember games where my coach would ask me in pregame, hey, are we ready? Because I would know. I would just walk out, I'd stand in the middle of my guys, and I could just feel it or not feel it. And depending on the feeling I got would determine what pregame ritual we would go through. And if they weren't ready, then I would do pregame warm-ups as if we were actually playing a game. guys are knocking the hell out of each other. It was to wake them up. And, that's kind of breaking a kind of a football rule to be hitting in pregame, full speed. But, that's the kind of stuff. So that's the value prop. I mean, I bring in, so I bring in having played and understanding and doing the work, the inner work on why, and then looking at the guys and modeling the guys that were around me. The hypnosis stuff, and why did he influence Pete Carroll so much, and then Pete Carroll on and on and on. And I look at all this, and then I started getting into NLP because of, like a lot of us, Tony Robbins on the infomercial. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I'm watching, I'm like, hey, that guy's saying a lot of the reasons that, I think I was pretty good in football. I should study that stuff, and it was really kindergarten compared to what I understand now and the training that I've had, from even mutual friends. And so that's the value proposition I'm giving. I walk in the practice, the first thing I'm doing is I'm talking about masks, which is really, identity stuff and physiology, right? And teaching them to be on the field. I talk about the field being a holy place. And I mean, and I don't just say that as a cliche. I mean it entirely, because, again, it could destroy a kid's soul, or it can make him, it could foster and fuel the rest of his life. And, as well as we talked offline, we've talked about masculinity here and there, and all that stuff can really take off in a positive way if it's done in a good way through the coaching.
So you emphasized very well the importance of a well-balanced and good coach. And I certainly remember I had many coaches as a young boy. Some were very memorable and they really lifted me up, and some were just downright mean. And what I'm sensing about you is that you have developed, you might have been this way for a longer time, I'll let you answer that, but you have developed such a well-rounded approach where you understand sort of the psychicness and of the field, the emotional importance of the centeredness and the peace of the player, as well as the support and then the inner drive. It's such an interesting combination of the boys or the young men that you coach. So you, as an adult now, and of course you have children of your own, would you have changed anything? I know this is the would have, could have, should have, but what would you do anything differently? Or do you think the way you have approached coaching, including all the mental aspects and physical aspects, are you good with it? Do you have anything to go back and correct?
As a coach, I never want to say, and feel bad that we didn't do something on Saturday that, would have made a big difference. I mean, we should have done it on Saturday. So, and it's an odds thing anyway. So you really don't know. It's just you go in and do your best. And that's all I try to teach my kids, my own kids and my coaching kids. I call them all my kids.
Of course.
And so I just, get better. Get better, be better, not just than last week's game, be better than you were in the last drill. And if we can install, using the tools that, you know a hell of a lot better than me, but I know enough to be dangerous. There's simple stuff like stealing authority anchors that I did when I first got there. I was stealing the head coach's authority. And as well as other authority anchors when I talk to the kids about their heroes and stuff of this nature, and then getting them to put on I call it put on your Superman, and that's the way we start practice. Put on your Superman, you got a cape behind you and, chest up, chin up and all that stuff. And I call it victory pose, you put your hands up in the air. And it's crazy. The kids all look around when they first see this like, what's up with this? This guy's weird, you know? But once they buy in and then they realize it's kind of fun, and then I'll end up flipping it, the Superman mask, and hey, why don't we put on your favorite football player, you know? And so some of these guys will have heroes already that are in the NFL. Put that guy on, you know, put him on you and just play with him on you the rest of the practice and see how it feels. And it's amazing, you know this, it's amazing when you're given, you know, those shackles of self are taken off of you. Even as a kid, we did that. You all of a sudden get to do new things and find new ways of doing stuff. And so that's the kind of stuff that I like to do. And then, man, once they feel that progress and that, you know, confidence in being able to do new things and being rewarded for doing those new things with their body or with their mind, we're on our way, right? We're on our way to have a team. You know, I realize that I'm dealing with individuals. We always say there's no I in team. It's the cliche, right? But there's a bunch of I's that make the team. And those I's have different levels of God-given physical talent and mental and maturity and growth. And they have to do with what they have. And it's about expanding that and expanding those possibilities so they're able to eventually start coaching themselves. Is what I like to say is, you know, at some point you need to be your own coach, and because you already realize you've already been demonstrated a million times that you can switch on a dime. So switch on a dime, you know, and in the middle of a game. And so those are the things that I love to do, and I love that these guys, they come from every, you know, I call them I've had my beach boys, I've had my inner city kids, I've had, you know, kids from dysfunctional families, parents, single parent households, you know, no father around, and you don't realize it sometimes. And luckily, you know, there's a parent will remind me once in a while at what we've been doing. And just recently, last year, this one mom, single mom, says, you know, so-and-so didn't like, not like, but was not very likely to want to be around male adults. I have no idea where that comes from or what it is. But she said, man, since he's been coming to you since the summer practices, all I hear every damn day is your name. Coach Tim told me this, I did this good, and I did this good, and I did that good, and blah, 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 blah. And even with me being gone from that institution, I'm still getting texts from this kid asking for advice. Should I do this? What do you think? What should I do? So rock on. That just jacks me up, man. I mean, because, you know, I know that it worked, you know, and that's the thing. If it's not working, shit, I got better things to do. You know what I mean? But it works. And so to go back to the question you said about the value proposition that we're offering. So I used to tell this when I was the president. I wasn't coaching that year, and I was the vice president before that of our youth league over in El Segundo. And I got the coaches together one time, and I said, listen, let me tell you a little story. I said, you know, someday we're going to all die, and let's just say we all agree with the pearly gates story, right? And we're going to rise up to the pearly gates. We're going to walk up, and there's, was it St. Peter guarding the gate, and he has the book. And, hey, man, what's up, dude? What's your name? Yeah, I'm Tim OKeefe. You know, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I saw you. I got you right here. Oh, shoot, dude, you coached how many kids over all that time? you coached how many, and how many of their families were ingrained with you also, part of that program? And you got like half of them, are on drugs, are, been in gangs, or been in jail. What? Come on. No, you're trap door, boom, gone. You're out of here, or does it say something a little bit nicer than that, right? Where you got a bunch of doctors and whatnot. And by the way, I kind of that story's kind of influenced by a talk I heard with John Wooden that I heard as an adult, where his mentor was this guy, Amos Alonzo Stagg, who at one time was the winningest coach in college football. And Stagg was a coach for a long time at my college up at Pacific. And the high school is named after him, et cetera, et cetera. And there's, as the story goes, Stagg was asked, Coach, how do you feel about your kids and this season? And he says, well, I won't know for another 20 years. And the point being that, what do they turn out to be? And that's what John Wooden said. He goes, I've got kids that are doctors, that are ministers, that are lawyers, that are, community helpers. So that's really what it's about. And to steal a mantra from this high school, Jesuit high school out in LA, they have a thing called Men for Others. And that's what I'm trying to teach. That's what I think football can teach, is men for others, but we can't be for anybody if we ain't worth the shit for ourselves, to use that word again.
Yeah, so it's really amazing. I love the story, and I also love the pearly gates reference, because it's sort of like you go out into the future and you look back, and then you account for your achievements and all the things. And I like how you have been building men for others. Even though you are an amazing man, you're a manly man, you're very well-rounded and healed man that many other men could look up to and should look up to and learn from.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. There is also an individual responsibility in your coachees, the men that you coach. What is that responsibility? What are the things that they have to actually embrace so that you could look back and feel good, and they can look back and feel good?
Oh, great question, because we're all volunteers, right? And you're quite often, part of the challenge in today's football is the kids aren't coaching. I used to joke with the head coach of the varsity last year. I would say, what's great about my coaching staff? And he goes, what's that? I said, I'm the youngest guy on the staff. I've two guys that are close to 70, and the other one's probably 2 or 3 years older than me. Where's the youthful energy, right? And so it's a lot different when you got a bunch of volunteers and a bunch of old guys and trying to influence them in your airy-fairy ways, right, than a kid. A kid you can just go, is a lot easier to sell than the guy who lived his life as an inner city LAPD sergeant. Okay, he's got a whole bunch of thick skin as a life that is you got to work through, and it's difficult. What I've always tried to do was like the one coach I was actually Dave was my high school coach. That's how long I've known him. He was a kid when he coached me in my freshman year, first high school coach, and he's coaching with me all the way till last year. And I'm sure if I called him up tomorrow, he would say, I'm in, because we're like a team that way. But nevertheless, I'm not going to get him to do certain things, even as cool and how he knows my ways. He just knows, all right, go do your thing. And, and I know it works. freaking nuts, but it works. Somehow it works. The other guys, not so much. And I haven't had, I was freshman coach with them 2 years, and, it's a process. You have to just slowly, through demonstration, sell them on the ways. And if I was to do it all over again, you asked that earlier, on the coaching, I would have a better reference to understand where I'm coming from. And frankly, that's why I'm excited that I'm doing this, because someday I could just, hey, this is how I coach. See it, let me know if you're into it. You can listen to me talk, understand what I'm doing here. And so there's certain lines that just can't be crossed. I mean, there's certain values that we all have to hold. You don't have to believe in the power of hypnosis or whatnot, but you just, you're not going to rip the rear end out of a kid, for 4 hours of yelling and screaming and, snarling and all that stuff. That's not cool. And you can't do that on my team. But for the most part, I mean, we all kind of are from the same cloth in the foundation anyway. So.
All right. So I appreciate that. And I know that you've been building a lot of men up. And I'm sure, even as you mentioned that the kid is texting you and probably you're one of his idols, right? I remember my brother had told me this many years ago. He's a karate coach in Budapest, Hungary, and he has the same strength and power. I have coached other men, through self-development and inner work. So this is something that I think all men should treasure. All men need mentors, other men they can look up to and learn from. And you had mentioned that you've been modeling men from a very early age. And modeling is one of the first things that neurolinguistic programming teaches and talks about. So you've done all this wonderful work. You've influenced lives, and I'm sure there's more that you would like to accomplish. What's next for you, Tim? What does life look like for you from here on?
I don't know. I run a digital marketing company. I know on that side, and I've been able to actually, with COVID and stuff, and taking the year off, I'm able to focus largely on the business side of things. As the football side of things, I just don't know. I don't know what the next step is. I'm not very hopeful. Or that's the wrong word. I'm not very optimistic, I should say, on where things are going in the sports world, not just with football. What a lot of people don't get from all that's happened over the last 6 months, it was going to happen anyway, in my view. It was a bunch of stuff that was sitting at the top of a tip of a rock, and all it took was just a little push. And it didn't get a little push. It got a giant push called COVID and shutting down the economy. And so I predicted almost from day one that we wouldn't have a season. And that's, at least at the high school and college levels, looks like it's going to be true. They're putting it off. Many of them are putting it off till December. I told a head coach, a mentor of mine, actually, a high school coach, I told him, I wouldn't count on it. And he goes, yeah, I know. And it's not just the rescheduling of this and all the viral part of it that people are concerned about. If the game doesn't have value, then it's not worth saving. Okay. And so that's why I harp on those things we've talked about to this point. Because if you're not bringing that value proposition, and there's a lot of guys that have not, then there's nothing worth saving. And that breaks my heart. But it is what it is. Now, what I'm praying for is that I'm wrong as hell, and everybody's light bulbs are going to come on and have found the way, and we're going to give a better value proposition. But the first slap in the face that I felt, I was at a clinic last year. I was coming in as the youth football coach, right? There's a bunch of college guys and high school guys there talking, and I was going to represent the youth guys. it was a typical football clinic, frankly, and guys talking about X's and O's and this and that and film and all this chalkboard stuff. And I get up there and I start talking about the value proposition. Hey man, you're talking about you got X amount of guys that get college scholarships, and then of those X and Y amount of guys go play in the NFL. But damn it, do you tell them that 87% of those guys in the NFL are going to be divorced and broke in 3 years? That wasn't a crowd favorite that I said that. At one point, one of the guys, he said, "Tim, that's not in our contract." Oh, okay. They maybe see the game a little different than I do. I see the game as a game that builds men for others, like Stagg did, like Wooden did. There's too many guys that are in it to win it, so to speak, to line their pocketbook so they can go on to the next level of their career. They don't get it, and that's the problem. And that's what's going on out there. I don't know much about other sports. I know football really, really well, intimately. I know a lot of people at all levels, volunteer and richer than God from their being a coach professionally. I know them at all levels. And you mentioned modeling a second ago. I model guys. I know what they're saying. I see in between the lines, and I know what is the stuff that works and the stuff that doesn't work. And so, and the funny thing is, by getting back to the athletes thing, athletes, I think, naturally model each other, or better, heroes, which is kind of why I do the mask thing and the cape thing. But I just, so I just carried that on, and I took an NLP modeling class years ago, which was my first formal education in NLP, and I'm pretty damn good at just catching something and seeing, why this is why it works. It's not because of all this other extraneous BS. It's because of this, or this process. And it's also why I think I'm a pretty damn good digital, marketer and SEO, because I reverse engineer why Google, how to rank in Google, and well, how do I do that? I model, I test, it's the same stuff that you do when you model greatness and people. So we're going to see. I mean, I think the next couple of years is going to be very interesting. So where do I go? I don't know. I don't know. I can't do what I just did the last few years. I've got to have a team around me that are bought in. So wherever I go, I've got to talk about the stuff I've been talking about and get them to promise to support that. And that would be the only way that I could come back to coach.
Well, thank you. It's a very moving story. And as we all know, we as human species, we are creatures of stories. We love to tell stories. We learn from stories. And one of the only ways for us to shift into a higher consciousness is by learning from the stories and starting to tell ourselves different stories. So I really appreciate your time today, Tim. And if our listeners would like to get in touch with you, whether it's for SEO or for whatever else, because they connected with you, how can they find you?
My business is spiderjuicetechnologies.com. And literally yesterday, I made it easier for people who have to ask how's that spelled? The short, I have a redirect that I set up. It's spiderjuice, so that should be easy enough, .tech, T-E-C-H, and it redirects to the larger spiderjuicetechnologies.com. And I have some great podcasts on there. I've got people from your world, the brain world. And what is interesting when I grab the hypnosis and an NLP people, a lot of them have sports connections, but none of them that I've done so far has had a football connection. So I love taking people into unfamiliar territory. And it's really not, because it's ubiquitous and, you're just in a different context. So, person's a person, right? But it's interesting because I think for people to learn, being outside of the context is that you're normally in can have value. And so, like I tell people all the time, you want to learn some great business stuff, go listen to Jim Mora, the ex-coach of UCLA, a friend of mine, as he laid down some amazing stuff about how he creates his football team, right? And so anyway, so I have all that kind of stuff as well as normal business stuff and marketing stuff on my podcast channel. And that's at soundcloud.com /Tim OKeefe, or a lot of it you can just get on my blog podcast on the site. And the Coach Tim stuff, I have facebook.com /Tim.O'Keefe.page. I got really creative on that one. And then I have a coaching one that I'm going to start developing pretty shortly, but it has some pretty good content anyways. TimO'Keefe.net. And that's the coaching stuff.
Thank you. And we'll share these links in the podcast description. So once again, Tim, it was an honor to meet with you and speak with you on this podcast. And I appreciate the time and the decades of wisdom, the decades of heart and dedication that you have brought to men, to the field of football, and to the community. Thank you so much for your time. And then we'll tune in next week.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.